little wet room. Water, there's no buffers, there's no anything. One of them's at work.
So we do have a live stream, so that is starting now, just so you all know. For those viewing via our YouTube channel, we're just going to give it a couple minutes to let anyone who might be in the parking lot make their way up, and then we will get started. I'm going to see if this can be turned down slightly. Is it like overpowering for you guys? It's okay? All right.
It sounds really loud.
It sounds real loud to me, but let me just check on that.
And Shannon, we're getting a lot of echo off of the mics up here as well, but it's fine with me if this is the way it needs to go. Chief, I'm sure it's set for a full room. You know, people tend to absorb sound, so.
It's used so many times, you never know how it's set. It does need to be turned down just a little bit. There's nothing.
I appreciate the fact that you realize your limitations.
Oh, I saw that, too many wires. I was a turkey.
All right, let's try that. How does that sound? Sound okay?
Much better. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you everyone for coming to the neighborhood meeting for the proposed Wake County EMS facility on Apex Barbecue Road. My name is Shannon Cox. I am the long-range planning manager within our planning department, and I'll be your facilitator for this meeting tonight. We do have the live stream going as well, so welcome to our live stream viewers. So our agenda for this evening, we'll just briefly go through some welcome and introductions. The Wake County staff will provide a brief presentation of the project, and then we'll use most of our time for discussion. We want to hear from you and get your thoughts about this project, and then we'll wrap up with conclusions and next steps. So I already introduced myself, but there's numerous people helping out tonight. Jenna Schaus is out in the hall. She's our senior long-range planner, manning the sign-up table for now. She'll be coming in to help with some facilitation in a little bit. She's also our bike ped expert, so if there's questions related to that, she can help to respond to those. We also have with the town of Apex, Chief Keith McGee, our fire chief. And with Wake County, we have Tommy Moorman, our senior project manager and real estate specialist. Ricky Campbell, a real estate specialist. Chris Colangelo, EMS chief operating officer. And Don Garner, deputy EMS director. So the purpose of the meeting this evening is really information gathering from you and sharing from staff in Wake County. This isn't a decision-making meeting, but we will take your feedback. The applicants will consider it in their site plan. Any changes beyond site plan will be brought forward to administration and town council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wake County to share a little bit of information. Sure, Tina.
I'm so sorry, I don't even know the appropriate time to ask questions, but I appreciate your explaining the process of after this meeting. Since this isn't a decision-making meeting, thank you for clarifying that. What happens to the discussions that are part of this meeting, and how will that be incorporated into the site plan, and then before it goes to the administrative body and into the town council?
Sure.
I know what that looks like in other segments, but I don't know how that looks like in this segment.
We will get to that, but I'll just briefly explain. So this is a minor site plan process. Would you actually mind holding on that question, and I'll get to that in a little bit? All right, thank you. Okay, I'll turn it over to you guys.
All right, good evening. Again, my name is Chris Colangelo. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Wake EMS. And pretty much what I wanted to share with you is just how we go about making a decision for a station. In this situation for this project, the current existing EMS station in Apex is going to be replaced. It's got to be replaced. DOT is going to widen 55, and they've already informed us that property will go away. So we started looking for a site. We take into account response times. We look at growth. So where is the growth happening in the area? Access to roadways. So again, what site would give us a better access to more roadways to expand the footprint in which we can respond in a reasonable amount of time? And then in this case, this particular site has an adjacency to an existing fire station. So there's some synergy there for us in having a public safety partner close. Since we work so closely together, that's one of the reasons this site was picked as well. And this site meets all of those requirements. We've seen growth to the west. We've seen that site gives us access to several of the major highways. So it increases our ability to get places in a reasonable amount of time. And then, like I said, there's some synergy there.
Very good, Chris. Next slide, please. I think as Shannon mentioned at the beginning, this is more or less a preliminary site plan approval. And the goal is to identify what we call the large food groups, whether or not the site meets the zoning, whether or not you have utilities, how's your landscaping plan looking relative to the town's UDO, what roadway improvements are being anticipated. So there's not a lot of high level, it is very high level, there's just not a lot of detail at this level of approval. So I'm going to walk you through what we have, what we know about the project, introduce you to a lot of the neat features that we have, and then we'll entertain questions and comments in the process. Next slide, please. The building is, of course, as Chris said, an EMS station. It's 4,300 square feet with 3 emergency response vehicle spaces. We will not be occupying all 3 of those right away. The emergency drive apron connects directly onto Apex Barbecue Road. You can see that at the bottom of the screen. The emergency drive is constructed to enable vehicles to turn around on the driveway, so we won't be blocking traffic on Apex Barbecue Road. You can see the modified hammerhead on the left side of the driveway up closer to the building. And again, that's our emergency driveway. That's a dedicated drive. We're dedicating 10 feet of right-of-way along Apex Barbecue Road. Besides the additional right-of-way dedication along Apex Barbecue Road, we are accommodating a utility easement, a thoroughfare buffer, and a parking setback. You may notice, many of you that are in development and construction, it's a very narrow site. It doesn't have a lot of depth, so the north-south orientation is squeezed. With the development of our site, we're adding a public sidewalk along Apex Barbecue Road. It's also being proposed along the potential Ellerview Drive. This sidewalk will actually extend all the way to Scotts Ridge Elementary School. That'll give the neighbors and residents of Kelly Grove a pathway all the way to the school. We're also widening the northern portion of Apex Barbecue Road. Again, we're at the lower portion of the screen. It's approximately an 8-foot ribbon pavement plus curb and gutter that we're installing. The current Ellerview Drive improvements, they're required by the town as part of the UDO. Those run along the western portion of our EMS site plan. These improvements include the road cross section, curb gutter, and sidewalk, and storm drainage. We're also using the drive for employee parking. We have 11 parking places right off of Ellerview. Our other features include a dry bioretention pond. This is to treat both quantity and quality. It will be designed to handle regular and emergency storm events. The device addresses, as I said, quality and quantity per the town's requirements. The stormwater calculations will ensure that pre-development and post-development impacts are the same. The areas noted in light green on the plan are areas being disturbed, and the dark green areas to the north, east, and west, so basically surrounding the developed site, Those are tree areas that we're saving. Those are existing trees. The new plant materials are noted with a dark dot, and it's difficult to see out at this level, but they're the dark dots you see with dark outlines. You'll notice them along Apex Barbecue Road, for example. That's new plant material there around our parking lot. But most importantly, I think for the neighborhood, along the 20-foot type A landscape buffer that is along the northern part of the property, we'll be supplementing that buffer with new plant material where needed to achieve the desired opacity. The buffer extends along the entire northern boundary from the Apex Public Safety property line all the way to the 50-foot gas easement on the western boundary of the site. So it's a pretty long distance there. The other plant locations shown are in accordance with the town's UDO requirements. They're around the building, the parking, and the road frontage. Other tree protections include conservation buffers as required by the town. Again, those are in the dark areas that you're seeing. Power and water will serve the building from the front there at Apex Barbecue Road. We will have a sanitary sewer service. It'll be a public improvement. It will extend to the far western boundary of the site. Site lighting will be provided by the town of Apex. You can see the light poles near the bottom of the employee parking lot. We have 2 light poles there, and then we have 1 light pole on the emergency driveway just to the right. Other amenities on site will include flagpoles. You'll see a sidewalk coming from the front of the building out to the new public sidewalk there along Apex Barbecue Road. We'll have flagpoles, and we'll also have a community bench, and that's part of our community amenities that we're providing. In addition to that, we'll have the Apex standard bike racks. We'll have 2 of those. So that is pretty much what we have on the site. Be happy to entertain questions now, or we can go through the building and then come back and catch them all at one time.
Let's maybe just keep on through the presentation, then we'll do questions.
Next slide. Very good. Again, the building is 4,300 square feet. This is a load-bearing masonry building with brick veneer. The color palette, it's a warm earth tone with an architectural metal roof. We anticipate installing a solar PV array on the roof. The overhead doors are fully glazed. These are doors similar to the Apex Public Safety building. Our color scheme is a little more muted. It's, again, more of a residential style building, so our goal is to fit into the context of the community. You'll notice the roof is a gable style roof. Again, that's a prevalent design characteristic of residential dwellings. We're trying to fit into the design aesthetic along Apex Barbecue and also in Kelly Grove. This is also a requirement of the town's unity of design. The image at the front, very top, that is our front, the top image on the page. The next image down is the back of the building. The 2 images at the very bottom, the image on the left is the west side. It's looking from the proposed Ellerview Drive. You can see that we have a large masonry screen wall there to the left. The image to the right at the bottom, that is as though you're looking from the Apex Public Safety building. You can see our waste collection enclosure over to the right. Those are residential cans, similar to what you might use in your neighborhood to roll out to the curb once or twice a week. Will, of course, include waste collection and recycling. So that concludes our site and building presentation at this level.
Okay, thank you. Before we get into discussion and your questions and comments, this starts to get at the question about the review process and what's required. So the Wake EMS project is considered a minor site plan. The town has different types of plans, and this category is a minor site plan. That's because it's less than 100,000 square feet of non-residential floor area. So for minor site plans, meetings like this aren't required. We don't have any neighborhood meeting requirement, so we're really appreciative of Wake County for coming out here and addressing, helping us to address some of the concerns that you've raised. There's also no public hearing required. Minor site plans are reviewed by staff and approved by staff. Following minor site plan approval, Wake County will request to be annexed into the town, and that does require a public hearing. So that's the approval and review process. So the staff reviewing minor site plans are called our Technical Review Committee, and they're composed of employees from 9 different departments. So not all represented here tonight. We have electric, utility reviewers, water resources, parks and rec, planning, emergency services. Most departments in the town are represented on that committee. And what they're looking for is consistency of the project with the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. The UDO is intended to promote and protect the welfare of Apex and its citizens. It is a regulatory document, so what's in the UDO is required, and it's applied consistently across development. So any change to the UDO doesn't impact just one site, it's all future development. So before we get into discussion, I have a final slide on this, but I want to fully answer your question. The feedback that you provide for us tonight, we will be summarizing in a neighborhood meeting report. Oh, sorry. Like, why is she coming down? This is the next part. In a neighborhood meeting report. That will be shared with our staff, administration, as well as town council. Wake County can consider any changes to their site plan that are within the bounds of the UDO and that are feasible for them to do to address concerns that you may bring up. Anything that's different than the UDO would be an amendment that the town council would have to consider. So we will be providing them with that report. Town council will have a work session on January 12th that will be available through the YouTube live stream if you'd like to watch it. But we will be sharing what we heard from you all with them, staff recommendation in regards to your feedback, and then they will give us direction as to how to proceed. Does that answer the question? Okay. Let me get a drink, sorry. Speaking through a mask. It's a little... Okay, so what we'd like to do for the discussion, because we have the live stream, I would appreciate if you could share your comments just one at a time and try to project as much as you can. If needed, I can paraphrase in the microphone, or we have a microphone over there. If you know you're a quiet speaker, you're welcome to stand at that one. So just raise your hand and I can call on you. If you are supportive of a comment or question, we prefer silent clapping just so that we don't disrupt the live stream, and we'll see your support for that comment. What we'd like to do is get all of the comments on our virtual whiteboard, which our viewers can see as well, and then we will address those one by one. So I did receive, and I want to assure you I've received the comments that were shared with town council as well as our project planner. And I've gone through all of those. From my read, they were focused on the extension of Ellerview Drive. So I've captured the feedback that I saw here, which included safety concerns with cut-through traffic, the loss of play and gathering space in the public street there where there's the basketball court, tree removal for building the road, the expense of building the road, and then there were also comments that it's just not needed at this time. So we can have a focused discussion on Ellerview Drive, but first I want to see, is there anything else that we need to talk about tonight? So Jenna's going to help out with that. So if there's any comment you'd like to raise, or if you just want to expand on what I've noted already, that's fine too. Sure.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Tommy, and Ricky, and everybody else in Wake County. This was extremely helpful, and I'm very appreciative that you came here and volunteered this session. My first question is about the change in topography at the site and into the neighborhood. my understanding, if I recall, is that the property slopes downward into the neighborhood. Is there a section drawing that shows the relationship of the proposed building to the rest of the neighborhood topographically?
Okay, do you want to just go ahead and address that one before we forget, because it's pretty specific?
Yeah, be happy to. You might be able to get back to our rendered slide, if you would. It has topography on it. You're right, there is some slope as you go back from the, we'll call it the south side, which is Apex, more northwesterly, which is why the BMP is where it is. It's the ideal spot. That's our lowest point. So you make an excellent point. We have the topo illustrated here, and I'm gonna have a hard time getting you to exact lines, but Apex Barbecue at the center of our driveway is 364 feet elevation. Our building pad is 362. If you look from left to right, and Ron going across our building pad, we're anywhere in the neighborhood of 362 to about 258. So we've kind of had to level out the pad there. Everywhere you look around the building, particularly out to the east, we're getting positive drainage and a drainage swell around the building, and that water is still being captured on our site. This is a fine blend of, we can't be too hot, we can't go any lower or else we're going to get into retaining walls and other problems. You know how it is as a developer, you have unintended consequences. So from our design team standpoint, this is the perfect blend of elevations all the way across. And so I hope that helps, and we'll be glad to get into greater detail as the CDs come along. And at that point, we'll be getting profiles and things of that nature too.
Another question?
Yeah, just a follow-up. So does that mean then that you'll have a retaining wall on the western edge of the property that runs along that tree buffer? Because you said that the building pad is at 362?
So the current plan is to not have any retaining walls.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah, that's our current design intent.
Yes.
This image just shows Ellerview. I think the previous one showed west of Ellerview was also part of this project or plan. Am I reading this slide correctly? If that goes west of Ellerview, or does it stop there?
So the county owns the entire northern parcel. It's Tom, right?
Yes.
Good to see you again. The county owns that entire, will own the entire western parcel. We don't own it today. It's part of the process that we have as a condition precedent to closing. This particular site plan, Tom, is addressing the EMS station specific. We are not developing the western side at all. Other than there is a sanitary sewer easement that goes along that western boundary, and you can see it really on the landscape plan best if we go to that at the back.
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to bring up this exhibit because it shows the full parcel, and then the red is their project.
Right.
And then I'll go back, the landscape plan you requested.
I think that would help him see kind of the extent of that sanitary sewer line.
I think I understood it.
Do you have-
I just didn't know,
okay.
And you made it clear that this isn't the meeting to discuss what's happening on the other side anyway, so if you have questions,
It's a great question, Tom, and I anticipated it. We brought the landscape slide just to address that issue of the sanitary sewer. If you look at the slide, the upper portion is an inset, and that is actually extending from Ellerview, the Ellerview right-of-way, over to the 50-foot gas line. There's an existing sanitary sewer manhole and line over on that part of the property, and that will be our sewer outfall. So thank you for that.
Can you let me know when it's appropriate to ask questions? I know you said at the end, more general questions.
Yeah, we're trying to get all the questions on the table so that we make sure we have time for everything. Did you have another?
That's not, yes, you mentioned in that thinnest part of the buffer on the northern edge where the houses are, you are going to supplement whatever plant material is there with additional plant material? Will you be
and I'm going to repeat it just in case people can't hear if they're viewing. So the question was about the buffer on the northern part of the property, if it would be supplemented with additional plant material and if the specific plants are known at this time.
So, Tom, we conducted a tree survey. If you look at the green image, everything you see that's green and not articulated with a black border or a dot, that's your existing tree canopy. The new material, it has the black dot with the black outline. All of that is plant material to supplement the existing buffer. But the town goes a step further, and I think you all will appreciate this. In the UDO, they're going to require for us to get final approval, they actually have to walk this buffer and make sure the opacity really exists. We all know that things in plan view come across entirely differently than they do in real life when we have them on the ground. So you have some redundancy in the UDO. There's a requirement to show it on the current plan, which we're doing based on the tree survey, based on existing conditions. But in addition to that, we're required for final approval to physically walk the buffer with the town and confirm that the desired opacities are being achieved. Opacity, I'm so glad you asked that. So opacity is actually the opposite of clear. It's the inability to see through. It creates a shield or buffer. So I think that will assuage any concerns that one might have. Thank you.
Yes.
So thank you. When decisions like this are made, I really like to have data to inform my view. And so what I did was I did a non-scientific, I want to start with non-scientific study of the traffic control sections that are being used for the sidewalks, where they have like the stop and slow down signs. And what my intent was to look at the human behavior of drivers when they are waiting at the stop sign as the other drivers go past them. And what I found is that in about 1 hour, I counted 241 cars affected by the stop or slow down. Of those 241 cars, 86 of them either turned left into the neighborhood or made a dubious U-turn on Kelly Road to go the other way. And so what I found is approximately 36% of the people chose not to wait the 2 whole minutes to get the slow sign, and instead disrupted, or I don't want to say disrupted, chose to take another route. And the concern that I have, the data that I'm bringing to the concern of the through traffic, is that when Kelly Road is either stopped via weather, accident, or anything, my prediction is that possibly, again, non-scientific, that approximately 1/3 of people are going to choose to take that right into our neighborhood, go through there, and go out another. And that is the data that I come with based on 1 hour of observing behavior in traffic. Obviously, if I had 5 days depending on paddling, I would come with statistical significance. But I don't have that opportunity. So that's really all I have to say about any kind of similar data in a similar area of how humans react to a slowdown in traffic and how they use the joint streets to go where they want to go.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so just for the viewers, I'm going to try to paraphrase. It was a good comment. The comment is about human behavior and the concern about cut-through traffic. If there's access through Ellerview out to Apex Barbecue, if there's a slowdown at the intersection, it's expected that people would tend to want to go through the neighborhood instead of wait for that slowdown. Which I'm sure that you all would like to talk about Ellerview Drive, so I'll just go ahead and get to that portion, and if there's other comments, we'll still have time to address those as well. So I wanted to share a little bit of information about what the UDO says about stub streets to make sure that's clear and why they're required. And just make sure that that's understood. So some of the comments that I saw mentioned that stub streets wouldn't need to be connected until there's at least 50 homes, which the UDO does require 2 points of access for 50 or more homes. However, the UDO actually says stub street connections shall be provided to all existing and planned stub streets on adjacent properties, and that's as development occurs. So it's not just 50 or more homes, it's as development occurs. Yes?
This is the specificity of that piece is in the subdivision section of the UDO. My understanding.
Which is applied to all development.
I think that's the question, is that, I'll let you finish, but I think that's the question, is I understand that the town has applied it to all development, but as a layperson reading it, if we pull it up on the screen, it looks like it is under the subdivision. So it looks like if this were being developed into a subdivision, then that would absolutely make sense. That's kind of the question.
Yes, so the UDO indicates that it's applied to all developments, not just residential subdivisions. So a change in that would require a change to the UDO, which is an amendment through the town council public hearing process. I believe it's also in the town's charter. So that, that would be a change to the UDO required through a public hearing and a town council decision. And that's how it's been applied consistently, across all developments, not just here. So a little bit, yes, go ahead.
So you're saying, I'm reading that first bullet point, stub street connections shall be provided to all existing and planned stub streets on adjacent property. The people who don't want this stub street to be a through street, I guess they're in the right terminology, but that seems, is that what we need to overcome? Is because it's written in that, even though there's not going to be 50 houses, there'll never be 50 houses, there's no more development in this neighborhood on either end. That you still need to provide and plan for this stub street to go through because of this line in the UDO.
And I'm arguing that the line in the UDO, while I understand the town's perspective, is that it gets under the subdivision. I hope that you're going to go through some of the specifics of, I've argued that I don't actually think it applies because of how it is written, and what it looks like. And I think that is a whole discussion, I think, it sounds like for the town council, but we did put all that in writing, and so at the moment, I'm a little disappointed that there's not more depth to that, because, like Tom said, if we understand what the UDO says, I appreciate that you're going to continue to explain it, but I think the question is the interpretation of the UDO, which is in question, and I think that's where we're kind of stuck.
Well, this meeting is really to make sure we're hearing all of your concerns, and to explain the project, explain why the UDO says what it does. That response to what you've raised regarding the interpretation would have to be made by town council in a public hearing process. So there will be several steps. So I'm sorry we won't be able to get to that tonight, but we're not the decision makers. We will provide feedback to town council along with a staff recommendation, and then there will be the work session and potentially a public hearing.
So with the work session, I'm sorry, I'm gonna let you finish, but I do want to continue down this road.
Okay, sure, yep. So I just wanted to explain why we have stub streets. So they really are critical to connectivity as we plan for development. I'll just, for example, you can see that Kelly Grove was originally built with 2. Yes.
So I guess maybe this is not the right place, but see, so when you build a stub street, and what Tom was trying to get to, what this is, for that was, what's going to happen with that other side, on the other side of the stub street, in the county owns? When the county owns that, they can essentially do what they like with that property. In the wild stub street, obviously, it's going to be built outside of our neighborhood, not within our neighborhood. Being as like kind of
Yeah, so you have a couple parts to your question. I think I'll get to some of that with explaining why we have stub streets and we require that they be extended and connected. So if you look at Kelly Grove, for example, there were 2 stub streets originally extended for the Toad Hollow portion and Kelly Grove 2. So stub streets allow for future development as it occurs. It doesn't always happen in nice, even parcels. So it helps us to plan for future development. It also helps to address congestion. Not just relying on thoroughfares like Kelly Road and Apex Barbecue Road, but allowing you and in other developments, allowing you to get out on the street that you actually need to be on. Apex Barbecue, for example, instead of Kelly Road. It takes a little bit of pressure off of thoroughfares. It also helps with planning well-connected neighborhoods for things like school bus routing, Amazon deliveries, if you're getting a ton of those to your neighborhood like I am, without constantly making turns. It supports access. So I know that there was a comment made that the stub street connection isn't really for your neighborhood, but you do only have one access point onto Kelly Road right now. And it was made, if something happens on Kelly Road, that impacts people driving on Kelly Road, but it could also impact your access out to get out of your neighborhood. Having 2 points of access can help with safety. Also, Kelly Road on our transportation plan is shown as a future 4-lane median divided facility. We don't have plans to add a median right now, but it is on our long-range plan, and that could change access for your neighborhood. So having that Apex Barbecue connection is helpful for your overall traffic flow. Finally, sidewalks are constructed as part of street construction. So it was already mentioned by Wake County, they'll be providing that complete safe route to school in combination with the town's project to Scottsridge Elementary School. So I do want to share some information about what is in the UDO that I think helps to address some of the concerns that you've raised. One thing that we do to address cut-through traffic is design neighborhoods without long straight paths. We intentionally slow people down. And I think some of the comment letters even mentioned people would have to make 5 turns to get between Kelly and Apex Barbecue Road. That's intentional to make it not a great way to cut through. So the UDO actually specifies that we should try to do that as part of residential street development. We also do have a traffic calming program, and so I wanted to share information about that with you all tonight. There's information on our website. You can go to apexnc.org/traffic calming program, and it's applicable to residential streets. So if there is an issue with cut through and speeding traffic, neighborhoods can apply for traffic calming devices to be installed through this program. It would have to be warranted. So our traffic engineers in our police department would do a study. They would measure traffic volumes and traffic speeds, and it would have to be supported by your neighborhood. You'd have to have 70% support. But if warranted and supported, something like a speed hump could be installed if needed. So that's what the UDO says about street stubs, traffic calming, and I'm sure you have more questions and comments, so please go ahead.
Okay, so one of the reasons for these stub street extensions you mentioned that's positive is the sidewalk.
Right.
I don't think our neighborhood would object to sidewalk. You not have a through street, stop sidewalk. That was part of it. The other part that you mentioned is one of the reasons to potentially do it is that Kelly Road, long-term plans, could potentially be this different kind of road, and so you might need this access. Since even if this clause in the UDO is applicable outside of the subdivision part, right, it talks about shall be provided. There's no
That's right.
During this time, echo and add that,
We're raising the roof.
well, that too. I can't speak for everybody's or everybody can do their reason the roof for me, if they agree, but, the concern is that it isn't a subdivision, right? We were welcoming additional neighbors, that would be different. And so, to Tom's point, if we were opening it up to another subdivision, that would be different. But because it is not, and that it may be a future project, I am not saying no, not ever. It's just, to Tom's point, no, not ever.
And that feedback we will include in the neighborhood report and share with town council. I can share in response to the question a few reasons why that gets really tricky. Once development is there, when you go back to add something like a road, it's much more difficult. The grading, the construction easements, it's much easier to construct as part of development. There's also a cost. If this is requiring it as development occurs, if it's not done as part of that development, there's a cost that will need to be paid for by somebody else. And when? What's the threshold then, and who's tracking that? So that's why we consistently apply the UDO as development occurs. But we will definitely provide that feedback in the staff report.
Part of that feedback I would love also to provide, because I'm sitting here and I look at my neighbors, some I know well, some I don't know so well, right? And there's not like NIMBY going on here. There's not people saying, no, we don't want this EMS station, right? We're not doing that, not in my backyard, that knee-jerk human reaction. I think we're saying, okay, how can we compromise and give the town and the county what they need as we grow and develop and have this, while still keeping our kids safe and our property values where they are, and being open to this future development in the future.
Okay. And I'm gonna try to paraphrase what you're saying for people who might be at home. The comment was that the neighborhood generally is not against the project, or not trying to be opposed to a project that's needed. It's really focused on how do we work together on the street issue. Yes.
There's a slide that shows the overall piece of land that the county's trying to buy.
This one?
Well, yeah, the whole thing, where,
I've got a
you
few
mentioned in your
options.
presentation, ESF, that this is a narrow strip of land. Why did you choose to place this on the narrowest section piece of land? And do you have other proposals or plans available to put this EMS station on a different part of this land you were buying?
I'll paraphrase that. So the question was, why place the EMS facility on this portion of the overall parcel, since it is narrow in this location?
That's a great question, and it's actually one we've asked ourselves, why this specific site? A lot of it was driven, first of all, let me back up. You're right, we had an opportunity to go east or west. It was the perfect storm. We could develop the western parcel or the eastern. The first thing that's great about the eastern side is the proximity to the fire station. The other thing is the extension of Ellerview actually works in concert now with how our site plan develops. So being closer to that, actually from a development standpoint, is good. The topography, as you go further out to the east, the elevations that Imran mentioned actually get worse. There's a family that I think has a pool. I noticed the elevation between the fire station and the residence there is dramatic, and we would experience a little bit of that same phenomenon. So from a location standpoint, a topography standpoint, and a public infrastructure standpoint, we identified this exact spot as perfect. If we go further to the east, it's a little bit of a knob. The elevations are going up, as Imran mentioned. Even to move the building we have now, we would be benching into that slope. So it's, from a design standpoint, it's worked pretty well.
Yes.
In the event that the town council approves some kind of a text change or an amendment to the UDO that would not require a connection to Ellerview, is it perspective as the planner, feasible to build another stub street, so it's like two stubs that are not connected? Is that the right approach?
If you look at the site plan, and you all may want to speak to that, but the parking lot is connected to a portion of Ellerview Drive. So I would anticipate that they would still build an apron up to that parking lot connection, which gets at what you were commenting out about. Would you basically build two stub streets?
That is not my understanding. Everyone or Mr. Morris to elaborate.
Sure.
So that's a great question. What I envision by your question is go ahead and build Ellerview to the point at which we need it and then stop. And then allow the existing part of Ellerview to the north to remain like it is until some future development precipitates the need to connect the two. That's really a town decision based on the UDO. Our site would work in that regard. There's not another real benefit to our project for that connectivity. There will be some ancillary benefit to you all at some point relative to response time and things like that. I know that's not a priority right now at this level. So, you know, the two stubs, if I described it correctly, in my mind doesn't injure the project in any way. There are connections still being made. There's the storm connection coming out of the BMP. You know, that would still occur. The town's perspective on the sidewalk extension that Tom mentioned earlier is still a consideration, and I think a value, a big value add to the community, but that's me looking from the outside. Tina mentioned something earlier about neighbors. You know, don't forget we're your neighbors. You know, the people that we'll put in this building, you will enjoy them as neighbors. People rant and rave about our EMS team all the time. And if you ever were to threaten to move a group like this away, you would have a real attendance at a meeting like this. So we appreciate what you're offering, and we want you to know that you're going to have some good neighbors.
So my understanding, Mr. Mormon, was also in our previous conversation, and this item is on the record, where we, is that the site plan could be designed without extending all of it.
Beyond his drive, beyond the driveway.
You would be able to shift or whatever, and I don't know what it exactly was, but that there was not an issue if Ellerview was not, the reason for the extension of Ellerview is not from the county's perspective, it's from the town's perspective. So if you did not have to put a street there, you would accommodate and put the drive onto Apex Barbecue. So Ellerview, from the county's perspective, does not need to be extended.
So I understand your question. The double stubs that Imran was talking about still had it where it is now, and of course we could use that. And so that is a great question. I see exactly what you're saying, Tina. And the emergency drive apron could be modified such that we could get access to our parking. It would take a shift of the building a little bit into the slopes that we talked about earlier. So it might precipitate some retaining walls and things of that nature over to the east of the site. But we could find a way to redesign to that condition. There is a benefit to this from an emergency response standpoint in that we're not crossing emergency vehicle traffic with staff coming in to park and whatnot. But that really hasn't been a big problem from my experience. So the answer to your question is yes, we could get this done without Ellerview.
I'd like to just clarify the comment so that we interpret it correctly when we share this information. Ms. Sherman, are you raising that question because you're concerned about even a portion of Ellerview from Apex Barbecue being constructed if it doesn't connect all the way to Kelly Grove? Or was it more if it's connected all the way to Kelly Grove?
I was just trying to set the stage that the cut through an Ellerview drive does not need to be there at all for the site to exist and to be. Wake County does not need Ellerview.
But
The town requires Ellerview. Wake County does not need Ellerview. That's kind of what I wanted to make sure I was setting that stage up. Obviously, there's lots of ways we can work around it, including
just so that we capture the comments correctly, there's no major concern if the project would move forward building a portion of Ellerview that doesn't connect to the existing stub. Is that right?
I think I want to hear a little bit more about that to understand what that looks like, what that means, why. I'm not opposed, but I don't have that information what that looks like in the drawing. I don't,
Well, one
it
we,
doesn't extend the stub street as the way that the town is described, and I'm not sure what the benefit is. But I'm not opposed to it, it's not a restriction.
Okay.
If you got more info you want to give me, then yes.
no, I'm just saying, without the way it's designed currently now, if Ellerby Drive is taken out of the game, it causes a redesign of the entire project.
Absolutely.
So, and, you know, as far as timeline, that doesn't really fit with the county's timeline.
I understand that, and that's something we have to deal with, and that's why we're here. But it's possible. It is not that it's not possible. I understand it not fitting in timelines, and that's regrettable, but I'm trying to understand what's possible.
The county, I just want to make sure I understood, similar to what Tina said, not a stage, but the county to build this could build it as is with very little changes to it with the two-stub street option.
Right,
No
that,
objection on the county part for that. I understand what you're saying is required by the town, and it's required by the town because of the interpretation of that one clause we saw that said it's applicable to all of them, not subdivision.
So the UDO requires the full extension of Ellerview from where it stubs now through their property to Apex Barbecue Road. A change to that would require a change. But as far as what the county is willing or able to do, they'll stick to that.
They can build this as is with the two stubs, but
right.
the town requires it because it's part of because of that clause.
When you talk about feasibility, that option is on the lower side of the pain threshold, if you will, and quite possible. To not have it at all is a quite different discussion, but that's, we'll look to the town for guidance on that. We can redesign, it's not optimal by any means, but there is, we don't have to have it. It's a UDO requirement, and consequently, because of that, we are maximizing our use of it in our site plan.
I'm actually go to the back of the room. Go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to repeat your questions. So the first question was if we have a measurement of the anticipated distance, I'm assuming from the building edge of the EMS building edge to the fire station. And then the second question is what impacts the neighborhood can expect during construction. Are you able to answer those, or we need to get back to that?
Those are great questions, and thanks for repeating the question because I didn't hear you that well, and so those are very good and interesting questions. We would have to pull a tangent off of GIS from building to building, and we're happy to do that for you. We generally would measure from property line to building. We could pull that if we had to after this meeting. We have the landscape plan on the presentation, and you can see it's a considerable distance from the building itself to the public safety property line. And then being a resident, you know there's also a tremendous change in elevation. The fire has their stormwater device there below the retaining wall, and then their building itself is elevated at a grade that actually works great off of Kelly Road. But there's quite a bit of transition and elevations through there. But we'll be glad to get you the exact distance. From a construction standpoint, this is an area where I actually was able to get some feedback from one of the neighbors about the town's requirement to show our construction trailer early in the project. The town has a very high development standard, so you all should be very proud of that. It's the first time I've had to show a construction trailer at a preliminary site plan approval, but it really helped because we got to see the impact on the tree canopy and also its relationship to the proposed elder view. So because of that and some discussion I had with some of the neighbors, we moved that construction trailer onto the job site proper. So as you're looking at the site plan here, the trailer will sit in the proposed employee parking lot during construction. It actually ties in well with existing utilities along Apex Barbecue. This is a great shot right there. It also has a sanitary sewer extension we'll be doing. So it's actually the perfect opportunity. There's a little bit of loss in the time between sort of the do-si-do you do to finish this and then move the trailer and finish that. So there's a little bit of coordination that's required. But that's a construction measure that we think will benefit the neighborhood and the community and certainly save tree canopy. The overall experience, we meet the guidelines of the town. The town has a sound ordinance. We certainly obey that. Construction, of course, usually doesn't happen over the weekend unless there's a crisis. And again, we would manage that with the town's sound ordinance. But we have very high construction standards. We meet weekly with the contractors on site, and we make sure that the site is well maintained. One thing that you may notice on construction sites is sedimentation and erosion control. We will be on top of that, not just from a project management standpoint, but we will inspect and enforce erosion control issues. The other thing is trash and debris. That's got to be maintained properly on site. We can't be poor stewards of the environment and the community, so we'll make sure we're taking care of that. The contractor still hasn't been determined, but one thing we will do is set the standard early in our construction documents. We'll reiterate it at the pre-bid meeting that we'll have, and we will enforce it at the pre-construction meeting through turnover. So we set a very high standard, and we will make sure we're very good neighbors. And I think I've got a great channel of communication with several of the neighbors already. We'll be glad to keep those open.
Other questions or comments? Yes.
If I understood your earlier comment, does that BMP tie into our existing neighborhood BMP? And if so, does that require clearing of the trees regardless of whether or not that stub road goes through?
The clearing of the trees at that BMP that we're showing, that would be required. That's an above grade dry bioretention. We call it Bioretention Pond. It does have some storage capacity, but it is intended to drain down and be a dry pond. It's tying in, you can see we'll call it a riser structure, Imran. It's the white square over to the east side of the pond. There's reinforced concrete pipe that leaves that, and it ties into the existing storm drain over at your neighborhood. So all those trees would have to be cleared for that improvement.
So do you have any sense of how that impacts our existing stormwater infrastructure in terms of capacity and flow and other environmental considerations?
I do. One of the requirements is that we meet the pre-development flow. So the pre-development flow and the post-development flow, those calculations, we can't have a net increase. So that will be fleshed out better in CDs, but this will be designed not to increase what you're already experiencing in your wet pond.
Yes, in the back.
I have another question. All my neighbors here are very smart and great questions that I don't even understand. But out of curiosity, from a very simple standpoint, if I'm in my backyard, will I be able to see the EMS building or will I see street?
So the question, if you can't hear, was will residences from their homes be able to see the building? So you're getting at height, the building, or will they see trees?
Thank you for that question. And one question to a question is, can you actually see Apex Barbecue Road now? I don't know where you fall in the neighborhood, but your line of sight in your backyard currently has some opacity. As we all know, it's a stand of pines through there. They've been strategically planted. I think it's been in a timber management program of some sort. That buffer that you have today will get better with the UDO. We're supplementing it with plant material. So the first thing we're doing is we're taking what you have now, making it better. And that's within the first 20 feet. Further than that, the town's going to require that we walk that buffer before they'll approve us for occupancy and make sure any deficit in opacity or the ability to see through will be addressed. And so that's the best assurance I can give you today. But I think it will get better for you. And it probably, from an acoustical standpoint, one of the best buffers from sound is actually another building. So I don't know where you are in the development. I'd be glad to meet with you personally and look at it. But it sounds funny, but some of the best soundproofing is actually another building. Imran, as a developer, could probably confirm that as well.
Any other questions or comments? Want to make sure we get through everything. Okay. And if something comes up or you just aren't a person, oh, go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
Sure, no problem.
I know this is going back to the staff and to go to TRC. I'd love to hear, you brought up some of the concerns we were about safety concerns. And I just wanted to reiterate that, I'll always speak for myself, at this moment, we have a fire station. And if we call 911 or if we need any sort of assistance in or out of the neighborhood, getting in and out of the neighborhood, it is what it is at the moment, right? We all bought our homes, very small subdivision, we all bought our homes with knowing and understanding what our, point of enter and exit and, what the timeline was like. Some of us bought our homes, before the fire station was built. So we only see this as, I only see this as an improvement. And don't quite understand, how much more improvement I'm going to get in comparison to, the downsides of having LRU extended in terms of response time. I understand obviously with the drive, folks will be able to enter that much more quickly. But in having the EMS station there, they're going to be able to enter that much more quickly than they are right this moment. And I feel like that's the best improvement we could have gotten, along with yay for the extension of the sidewalks that we are in this moment getting right now. Those are the improvements that we've been looking for and excited about. Again, in terms of safety concerns, in terms of EMS response times, this isn't really a concern of mine. Again, I think it's for all the neighbors, but not really a concern of mine.
Okay.
And so we'd love to make sure that if the EMS folks, fire has any questions, I'd love to kind of hear what those concerns are. But, as far as that's concerned, I want to just be clear that I'm not quite seeing when you talk about cost-benefit analysis, what the benefit is in terms of response time for the neighborhood in comparison to extending or not extending LRU, as it relates to the fact that, right now we're going to have improvement overall in having an EMS station.
Okay, so just for the viewers, I'll paraphrase that. The comment and question was that it does not seem that the connection of Ellerview Drive would substantially improve response time from fire and EMS compared to what will already be a benefit from having them so close compared to where they are now. So the comment that I made in regard to stub streets and why they're required as part of the UDO and connectivity was more about ingress and egress for neighborhoods if something were to happen on Kelly and you only have that one way out. Not so much about response times, but I'll let Wake County speak to anything about the response times.
I was going to say, there's really no difference. I mean, it gives us another access point. Another access point is always good. I don't know if fire feels differently, but from a response time, we can go either direction.
The other consideration would be school buses. I mean, that's, I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, and Wake County Public Schools has told us that well-connected neighborhoods are very important for them, and for, not having to make turns in and out, going on thoroughfares, stopping in cul-de-sacs. They have provided that feedback to us, so school routing, other deliveries, that type of thing.
I don't think that's gonna be, so is it when we talk about getting connectivity to public roads, I think I can safely say that again, we all purchased our homes knowing that there was one entrance and exit, and the neighborhood is at the moment not set to stand, and I don't see that as an issue. It's an issue that we all bought in knowing. As far as the county public schools, I reached out to them. We have one bus stop that feeds the neighborhood, serves, I think before it served probably, we had the year-round school calendar and the traditional calendar, so we probably serve 6 different schools, but I don't think that they're having any trouble. So I think our neighborhood is a unique neighborhood in the way it is set up, in the way that we only have 37 homes, 47?
48, I believe.
In the neighborhood, and with very little room at this moment to expand. And so, that is not, and coming back to this, we're not saying that, but that, at the moment, it's not something we expand, we all purchase knowing what this was. So that, I just, again, encounter the concerns about access, the concerns about safety, and again, I welcome the county public schools discussion in that, but I don't think that they have a problem that is going to be solved. And to be honest, when it comes to the neighborhood, they do have to back out, but they're not going to, the school bus is not going to be able to maneuver in our neighborhood as easily, so that is not even going to be solved for them. So I think that those are all clear.
Okay. Were there any other comments or questions? Yes.
Can you tell us again what the timeline for this project, assuming that we get through some of these key questions and approvals?
Yeah, we do have a slide about this, and please note the subject to change line there. So Wake County is working on their third submittal of their minor site plan to the Technical Review Committee. That's due January 14th. The committee will review that. It may or may not be approved after the submittal. Their current plan is that if they stay on track, it would be a February 22nd public hearing for the annexation portion. And currently expecting spring to summer 2022 for commencement of construction, and then about a year later, building occupancy. So that's the project. As far as next steps for this discussion, the neighborhood meeting report will be prepared tomorrow. So if there's anything that you weren't comfortable saying or you think of tonight when you get home, feel free to email me your additional comments, or we have a Dropbox back here on the table before you leave. To get them in our neighborhood report, I would really appreciate them by noon tomorrow. You can always send comments later, but to be in the report, that's the cutoff. My email address is there. We will be submitting that report to Town Council. They'll have their work session on January 12th, and then we'll know what direction they would like to go as far as next steps after that. Please do provide your email at the sign-in if you didn't, because we'll follow up with you via email from this point forward. Yes, sure, that's fine.
Thank you for explaining the timeline. So feedback is going if at the work session, it sounds like the town, the
Yep.
So what kind of happens at that point? Because that doesn't give an opportunity to change the UDO at that point and affect the project.
Yep. So the expectation is that, and this is why we're moving so quickly with the work session and getting the neighborhood report, we would try to have a public hearing if the direction was, let's look at amending the UDO. We would try to have a public hearing for that in February so that it would be prior to the annexation or even at the same meeting as the annexation public hearing. I think Wake County's been a really good partner in collaborating. Like, they came to the meeting tonight, prepared this information. I think we would try to work with them to just hold off on the minor site plan approval if the direction was to go through with amending the UDO so that it could be adjusted accordingly. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So let me repeat that just so I make sure I did it right. So if the council work session, council decides, I'm sorry, when does the TRC, the technical review meeting?
Right. Let me see if I have that in my notes. January 27th is the next TRC meeting.
Okay, so the council meets their work sessions before the TRC.
Yes.
And so if at the council session, the work session, they decided the UDO does need to be amended, the minor site plan would not go before the technical review committee on the 27th.
It still would. So it would still go to the technical review committee on the 14th. The technical review committee would complete their review. They would give feedback to Wake County. But typically there's at least a couple cleanup items. So we would have a little bit of time to get those taken care of while we get through the potential UDO amendment.
So would it be, so if it comes out of TRC approved, would it be approved with conditions before the council meets?
If the direction is to pursue a UDO amendment, I do not believe it would get through approval of TRC. There's likely to be something, cleanup that would hold it up.
Okay, so if UDO is decided by council, it would not, it would go before TRC, but it would not be approved, it would be held over to the February, in which, at that point, there would be a public hearing before the annexing, but it can't be annexed, right, until the TRC is done approved? Am I understanding that right?
So the design could move forward, knowing what we would expect to be changed, and we would work with Wake County on getting the design to keep moving forward as close as possible based on town council direction. We would have to wait for the public hearing before it could be approved. That public hearing for the UDO amendment could occur the same night as an annexation public hearing.
Very good, thank you for walking.
Yep, it's complicated. And we're really going to try to keep moving because it's an important project and we don't want to hold them up as well.
Yeah, and for the planners in the group here tonight, to change a UDO after an applicant's already submitted would be unprecedented. We certainly enjoy the collaboration. Again, we appreciate what the town's doing, but that puts the town in an awfully peculiar position to change the rules after an application's been made. So just wanted to point that out.
But in this sense, the application, that there isn't a concern to change the UDO for your particular site plan. Right, from the county's perspective, again, coming back to the site plan could change, you don't need the road. So,
Only insofar as it involves the road, the Elderview extension.
right,
But relative to the design and the timeline, those are concerns. But again, the road is not germane to us getting this built. But it does help honor the timeline we have with the seller and some other parties. So we appreciate what the town's doing, what you're doing to try and move things along so that we're not in suspense for very long.
yeah, we want to
Thank
get
you.
it right, right, we want to get
Yep.
it right, but we do have this outstanding issue that we have to resolve, so hopefully we can get the town to get it resolved.
Are there any other questions, comments, confusion we can try to clear up before you head out. Okay. Thank you very much for coming out, for listening and sharing your thoughts. Again, please provide your email so that we can keep you updated. And if you have any follow-up questions, let us know. And we'll be hanging out until 8, so feel free to come up to people and ask questions on your own as well. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.